Joe Heschmeyer with us, which is something to look forward to in itself. But we've been doing this fun thing this year where we started back in the Lenten season, just having an open forum for those who were about to come into the church at Easter. And those were getting better and better. And then after Easter, we did open forum for those who just came into the church, and we had a ball. It's just so much fun to have these conversations. So if you're new to the Catholic Church, and define that as you like, you can tell us how you came to that conclusion when you get on the line. But if you're new to the Catholic Church and you've got a question that you'd like to ask Joe Heschmeyer, give us a call, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Joe, of course, is an apologist here at Catholic Answers. He's was an apologist before he came to Catholic Answers, but he was also a lawyer, and he was a seminarian, and now he's a dad and a husband. And his most recent book is, wait, now let me think, which one?
But not in that order. I should specify. Husband came first.
That's good. I'm sorry to throw things out of order there. I just like the kids, so they came into my mind first. I like the kids more than I like your marriage. I mean, I like the two of you, but your marriage is the kids are entertaining. The marriage,
you know
not.
What? I should have just. This is just getting worse the more you explain.
Well, they are nice children.
They are. And that was not the controversial part of that statement.
Oh, really? I didn't mean that. Well, hold on. I don't know. I'm going to have to go back. This is
marriage, you said, in introducing a guest. Go on. No, this is the easy job, by the way.
This is the easy part of the job. Joe, what's your most recent book? Is it The Early Church Was the Catholic Church?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. And what's the next book going to be? Do you know? Do you have any idea what's coming out?
Yeah, well, I just finished working on a 20 Answers guide, which we don't, those aren't signs. I guess I won't even tell you which one it is. And the book I'm working on right now is on the Eucharist. And I'm taking a different angle with the Eucharist than most books I've seen on it. The crux of it is that I'm arguing that if you understand the Eucharist correctly, then everything else kind of falls in place in terms of making sense of the New Covenant, making sense of the Old Covenant, making sense of early Christian worship, and all this stuff. And that so in other words, instead of saying here are these verses that seem to mean the Eucharist is true, and here's what it means, to say if the Catholic claim is right, that makes sense of A, B, C, D, E, and F. Yeah. And if you don't accept that, then it's a lot harder to make sense of those pieces. So it's a different way of kind of approaching the question.
Yeah. It doesn't sound as good as The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, but I'm sure it'll be a good book.
Thanks.
Sorry, Joe.
You're doing a great job today.
Thank you. I'm on fire. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. If you're new to the Catholic Church, and again, define that however you like, but there's many people who just came into the Catholic Church at Easter. Some came, but you don't have to come in at Easter. You might have come in before that. Maybe it was you came in a different way than is the usual nowadays with that Easter Vigil, the wonderful Easter Vigil that we have where we welcome folks into the Catholic Church. However you came in, whenever you came in, if you feel like I'm new to the Catholic Church, call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Joe Heschmeyer, I apologize for all the tomfoolery. It's very hard for me not to do that when you're around. But we just got the news today that apparently Bishop Barron is leaving L.A. and going to Minnesota. So
yeah, the Diocese of Winona.
Yeah, so he's not going to be an auxiliary bishop anymore. He's going to be what we call an ordinary. Could you just describe what that means, that he'll be an ordinary?
Yeah, so the basic structure of the church is set up in dioceses. And a diocese roughly corresponds to a city and it's a surrounding area. And dioceses in the U.S. are often very large, much larger than, for instance, in Italy. In Italy, even a pretty small area, like a small town and kind of the surrounding areas, might be a diocese. And so the early days of the church, towns were a lot smaller than they are today. Mm-hmm. And so you basically the older the place is, the more likely you are to have a small diocese. So it means in the U.S., when you get to the American West, you have these massive dioceses. The Diocese of Los Angeles is millions and millions of people. And so there are what are called auxiliary bishops. Auxiliary bishops aren't the head bishop in the diocese, but they are over a certain area within the diocese. And so they assist the bishop, who is the one true bishop for the diocese in that sense. And so that structure, which there's even some some indication there was a structure like that, maybe even in the Diocese of Rome in the early church, that there were maybe auxiliary bishops who helped the main bishop, the Pope. And that certainly is the case today in Rome.
Right.
So it makes it complicated if you're Bishop Barron, and I don't want to speak for him, but when you're running a group like Word on Fire, you are really at the whim and mercy of the ordinary. Now, I think he has a good relationship with Archbishop Gomez, but it still means that you're not kind of free to do your own thing in the same way that he will be once he becomes the Bishop of Winona, because then he'll only have to clear things kind of with himself in terms of getting permission to do things. So I hopefully this is a good move for the folks on Word on Fire. I know it's been kind of a difficult time for them lately, and I hope this is a really positive move for everyone involved. Yeah. And also, I think just, Winona is about 4 hours away from Chicago. That's probably a lot more bearable. 4 hours driving away from Chicago. Oh, yeah. It's probably a lot more bearable than flying cross country.
There's one big loser in this, though, that you didn't mention. California. We cannot afford to lose any more good people. It's not. This is like they're all leaving, and I don't know if Bishop Barron arranged this to get out of California, but we're gonna miss him.
Yeah, so congratulations to him for sure.
Yeah. The number's 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. If you're new to the Catholic faith and you have a question about the Catholic faith, you are welcome to call. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest and happy to answer whatever question you have. And by the way, thank you to everybody else leaving the lines open, but it's sometimes, okay, we have to coax out the new Catholics to pick up that phone and call. First of all, there's no bad question. Well, there are bad questions, but I've asked them all already of Joe. There's so that's out of the way. Now you can ask whatever you want. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Joe, we've got you on standby, by the way. And are you aware of this? We've got you on standby because you're a lawyer, and then a guy who you were a seminarian, and then you were a husband. And following that, you became a father. So,
well done.
Do you know why we got you on standby?
Yeah, I mean, the Supreme Court, the term is ending soon, and so we should be expecting mid to late June, which is not very far off, the announcement and decisions, including Dobbs, which is the case that stands to overturn Roe v. Wade, which would be a pretty amazing outcome if that's true.
It would be an amazing outcome, and I'll for the folks are calling now, but when we get some folks on the line in a second, the number is 888-318-7884. But for those who are new to the Catholic Church, I'm sure that I think the Catholic Church's reputation on being pro-life is perfectly clear. So maybe say something about why this is not a political thing for us. Like it's not a Democrat, Republican thing, anything like that. We want Roe overturned. Why?
Yeah, because part of the whole idea of Christianity is that it's built on a twofold principle of loving God and loving neighbor. And you don't love your neighbor by killing them. That's kind of the basic principle. Now, within that, you can even tweak that kind of understanding a little bit, that there may be situations like self-defense and war, and we'll leave those aside. The heart of it is to target the most vulnerable members of society, the unborn, for legal extermination is so profoundly contrary to the notion of charity, so profoundly contrary to what you ought to give to your neighbor, and especially a family member, especially your own child, that it strikes at the heart of the basic moral sense of Christianity. And this is not some 20th century or 21st century kind of development. We see early on that the Didache, for instance, back in the first century, talks about not performing abortions and not committing infanticide, because this is something the pagans did and something that the Christians found abhorrent. And, the other thing, I guess, connected to this is that abortion is often kind of an excuse not to deal with the harder social issues. Meaning, there are a lot of women facing really difficult economic circumstances, family situations, you name it. And rather than providing the assistance that's necessary for those women to actually improve their situations. It's much easier to just say, well, we'll let you get an abortion, or we'll pay for you to get an abortion if you're some of these big companies that don't treat their workers well. It really is. It really is truly awful. And it's, again, something similar was true in the Roman world. Well, girls are a liability, so you can leave your girls to die on the hillside because they're not worth raising. That kind of mentality is so repugnant to human dignity that every Christian everywhere should say, yeah, this is wrong. This is something we need to stand up to. And I think it's worth maybe adding here, getting past that is really just the beginning. Think about it in the U.S., the last issue that I would argue was this divisive was probably slavery. But once slavery was outlawed, that was not the end of things. And in a real way, it was the beginning of things. And in things we didn't always handle very well, like the post-1865 story of what happened to freed slaves when jobs were often closed off to them, and they often ended up in even worse conditions economically and working conditions that would just be horrific, sometimes even for the people who were former slave owners. They just had kind of got a change of title, and it wasn't necessarily much of a step forward. So in the same way, I think like getting rid of legalized abortion is a really important, really necessary first step. But that should say, okay, now what? Like, if these kids aren't going to die, what are we going to do to help make sure that they're taken care of?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, I hope we're about to find out. I mean, I suppose as the days pass, you become more and more anxious. Are they going to change this decision? I mean, I'm sure that they will change the wording of the decision that's handed down and all that. I'm just worried, are they going to change the fundamentals of this decision? But that's why we have you on standby, and we'll when that decision comes down, we'll devote a full program and a panel and all that to discussing what it all means when that decision comes down. So many prayers. Keep praying. Don't forget to keep praying. But this hour and next hour, it's open forum for new Catholics. If you're new to the Catholic Church and you got a question you'd like to ask Joe, whatever that question is, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We'll take a quick break and we'll come right back and start right into those calls.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
EWTN uses the power of radio to reach people whenever and wherever they're searching for answers to questions about their Catholic faith. EWTN radio is heard on over 500 domestic and international AM and FM radio affiliates. For a complete list of programs and how to hear EWTN radio, visit EWTN.com and click radio. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. And in addition to all the things that I described about Joe before, he also does RCIA work in the Catholic Church. The usual way that you come into the church is through the rite of Christian initiation of adults, and Joe helps to teach those classes. And so if you're a new Catholic, after you've gone through all that, after you've received the sacraments, does the questioning stop? Is that it? Are we done? Nope. It's not that way at all. There lots of more stuff comes up, so if you've got something like that, we'd love to take your call. We'll start in Omaha, Nebraska. Mary, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio in Omaha. We're glad to have you, Mary. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi, Joe. I was just wondering if you could explain what the early church taught about the Marian dogmas. I know that we get a lot of the teachings about Immaculate Conception and her bodily assumption from the early church rather than the scriptures, but coming from a sola scriptura background, I was wondering if you could explain what the early church taught about her.
Yeah, that's a great question. I like the way you framed that question, too, because a lot of what's here isn't just the importance of like scripture versus scripture plus tradition, it's also like, how do we understand scripture? And so think about like Luke 1 and Luke 2. And twice St. Luke tells us that Mary pondered all these things in her heart. And so that's a good clue that when we're getting to the Marian doctrines, we're getting to things that are worth pondering rather than kind of a surface level read. There are a lot of sola scriptura Protestants, not all, but a lot of sola scriptura Protestants who really favor what they consider the literal meaning of the scriptures over a deeper, maybe symbolic or allegorical meaning. And I get why they're worried about, people misinterpreting them allegorically, but the danger is that we often miss the deeper meaning. Think about it like Christ's parables. You just can't understand them if you leave it at like, oh, that was an interesting story about a guy who had to like sow some seeds, and just leave it at that. Like you just totally miss the point of what's going on. So likewise, when we get to the Marian doctrines, a lot of it isn't just like a very surface level, Mary is the Ark of the New Covenant. It's rather learning to read Scripture kind of in this way. And the early Christians were masterful at this. So, for instance, in Against Heresy, St. Irenaeus talks about Mary as the new Eve. And he's written in about 180. This is about a year before the word Trinity is first used to describe the Trinity. So this is super early Christianity. Irenaeus is formed in the faith by St. Polycarp, who was a student of the Apostle John's. So that's kind of how far back we're talking about in terms of really good explicit evidence. But once you get this new Eve typology, it makes a lot of sense. As Irenaeus presents it, you've got one virgin in the garden who is tempted by a fallen angel and disobeys God. And you've got another virgin, Mary, who is greeted by the angel Gabriel and conceives the remedy to the fall. And that she receives the word that undoes the bad word, so to speak, of Genesis 3. And so Christ is the new Adam, both in the sense of a new creation, but also in the sense of being a repudiation of the old Adam's sin, that he goes right where Adam had gone wrong. And so once you kind of view that imagery, that doesn't mean, by the way, that Mary and Jesus would be understood in like a marital way, but it does mean that there is a fascinating order of creation, and Irenaeus points this out, that Eve is taken from the side of Adam, and Jesus comes from Mary in this virginal way. So we're looking at like two people in history who are not sexually reproduced, which is just kind of fascinating. So there's all sorts of really cool stuff like that. Once you get those images, I would say, what does it mean to say Mary is the new Eve? What does it mean to say she's the Ark of the New Covenant or the new Ark of the Covenant? All of the, like, once those kind of biblical meditations are in place, everything in terms of the typology, all of that makes sense. Like, oh, okay, I can see now why she needed to be preserved from sin, because the holiness of the ark was referencing the holiness of what the ark had within it. And so, like in 2 Samuel 6, when the Ark of the Covenant is brought into the hill country of Judah for 3 months and David dances before it, I can see now what Luke is doing in Luke 1, where he shows Mary going into the hill country of Judah for 3 months and John the Baptist in the womb dancing before Christ. Like, he's showing us something rather than telling us. That's kind of the way that we need to learn to read Scripture, and that's the way that I think the early Christians were fantastic at reading Scripture. Does that help? Does that make sense? Because it really is like a shift in hermeneutics. It's a shift in kind of how we read the Bible.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you so much, Joe.
And
absolutely,
Mary, you're new to the Catholic Church. When did you come into the Catholic Church?
I got into the Catholic Church about 2 years ago. Yeah.
Well, welcome home. Welcome home. I'm so glad that you did. And call anytime.
Thank you.
We love getting the calls.
Thank you.
That was a great question.
Joe, we'll go to Joseph now in Vancouver, Washington, listening on Modern Day Radio. Joseph in Vancouver, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Oh, hello there. Yes, my question is about what is allowable for Catholics to do with their bodies at death. I know that cremation seems to now be allowable, which therefore, means that in terms of an intact body to resurrect, that doesn't work. But now, what about the process of decomposition. Specifically, this is a process that is done by a company called Recompose, where the body is combined with soil and allowed to decompose, and the soil then that is produced is retained and then saved and then used to nurture new plant life. My deceased wife has chosen that method, and so that is hers. That is where she's at now.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the particular method you're describing. I can give you the basic principles, though. The reason the church was historically opposed to cremation is out of a fear of it being chosen for the wrong reason. We want to avoid anything that says or that reinforces the belief that once we die, we're just done with our bodies. That's not what we believe. We believe we'll have our bodies forever. That when you die and go to heaven, God willing, that's the beginning of something new. It's not the end of the story. And that beginning of something new is then brought to a yet higher level at the last judgment. That when the general resurrection happens, you will be reunited with your body, because you are not just a body and you are not just a soul. You're a body and soul unity. And that unity is what you are going to have forever, not just a disembodied soul. So cremation or any process that appears to reject that treats the body as something disposable, the church has historically resisted and opposed. Nevertheless, and this is the important kind of other half of the equation, there have always been people who've, died at sea, or their bodies rotted in the grave, or they were incinerated in a fire, or you fill in the blank, where there may not be any body to speak of. And we've always known that the resurrection of the body was going to involve not just replacing atoms back where they were. I mean, your body now isn't just atoms. The atoms that comprise your body change from moment to moment. You are not your atoms. And like your body is not your atoms. And so what is instead brought back is the body, not the particular atoms, because the atoms that comprise your body may have been in a million other bodies before. That's true of everyone in history. So someone who's cremated, they will still be reunited with their body. And so what we were opposed to in cremation was not that this was somehow going to prevent the resurrection of the body, but that it might mislead people. And so cremation now is permitted as long as it is not opposed, it is not based on a denial of Christian dogma or the animosity of a secret society or hatred of the Catholic Church or the religion. In other words, like, you don't want to be cremated because you reject the resurrection of the body. So someone who does that would be ineligible even for a Catholic funeral. But someone who believes in the resurrection of the body but has other reasons, financial, sanitary, ecological perhaps, could go another route than the traditional burial routes. And that wouldn't be contrary. So I think based on that, without knowing very much about it, I'm hesitant to give much of an answer other than to say, if your wife didn't choose it because she didn't believe in the resurrection of the body, that's fine. She'll still get her body back at the last day. The only hesitation is that we don't want to think of the body as something just merely disposable. That's all I would add.
May I suggest an article?
In other words, that's perhaps something that I could do as well.
I would suggest two things, if I may, here, Joe. One, in Washington State, the Bishops' Conference has published a letter about this, and I would read that letter. I have not read it, but the bishops of your state have published a letter. Also, last year at this time, just about 12 months ago, there was an article on this process in America Magazine that I think you will find quite helpful. It's by Alejandra Molina, and the headline reads this way: "The Catholic Church opposes composting human remains, but it's becoming legal in more states." And it's somewhat nuanced as far as which exact process you're talking about and what exactly is happening to the body. But much like Joe just said, I think the primary concern is that the body be reserved to a sacred place, interred in a sacred place. But
that's a very good point. I didn't even mention that aspect of it, which is also true, and based on this same principle of having respect for the body.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it when you talked about because we usually hear it in regard to cremation, that you don't just willy-nilly scatter remains. But
Right.
I just want to suggest that article to you in America Magazine because they did a good job kind of cover because these things are they're so new. Like I thought you were going to ask about this process of water composting that has become the rage in some places, which the church opposes, but that's not you're talking about something even more up to date than that. So I'll just suggest that. Anything else, Joe, before we got to take our break?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Thanks very much for the call. We're glad you called, Joseph. We didn't get to ask you about when you came into the church, but we got to go to the break, so we'll do that and hope that you'll call again. Hey, it's open forum for people who are new to the Catholic Church. If you're new to the Catholic Church and you've got any kind of question at all, 888-318-7884.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church at shop.catholic.com or pick it up at a good Catholic bookstore.
In These 12, The Gospel Through the Apostles' Eyes, best-selling author Rod Bennett gives a riveting re-examination of gospel events from the ground floor perspective of Christ's own hand-picked successors. In his trademark storytelling style, Bennett movingly depicts what it was like for the apostles to witness Jesus' teaching and miracles up close. Why did he call them, and what did he intend for them to do? Order your copy of These 12 today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Tomorrow on More to Life, how can I help?
Are you struggling to get the help or support you need? We'll help you find your voice.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and I think people are being somewhat reticent to call, maybe thinking, no, they don't want my question, but we do want your question. If you're new to the Catholic Church and you've got a question, we'd love to have that conversation with you. And what we have found in these conversations is that we end up just hearing great stories, and it's so encouraging to all of us, our listeners and ourselves, about people coming into the church, because there's plenty, I don't know if you know this, but there's plenty of controversy that gets reported constantly. But the sheer joy of coming to Christ in the sacraments is something worth celebrating, and we love hearing about it. And you can tell us whatever you want, as much or as little as you want. But if you're new to the Catholic Church, pick up that phone and call, and we'll get you an answer to your question. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And I'm going to say something really sad. Every single line is open right now. 888-318-7884. Did you want to follow up on the decomposing? I'm so childish that the entire time I'm thinking of the old joke about they opened up Beethoven's grave and he was erasing music, and they said to Beethoven, "What are you doing?" And he said,
decomposing.
There you go, Joe. Joe knows that old second grade. When I was in second grade, that's the funniest thing I'd ever heard. That was the funniest thing I'd ever heard.
That's decent. I know another classical music joke, but I feel like this is going to take us too far down.
But you wanted to say some more, though.
Yeah, I'll come back to it later.
Oh no! Oh man.
Anyway, yeah. So this question of decomposition, at first, I admit I was taken a little bit aback by it. I'd never heard of this practice, but I was able to do a little bit of reading on it to explain just what it is that they were even describing. Because it's what I originally thought the question was about not using chemicals to artificially preserve the body, and that's okay. I mean, obviously, in the early church, you didn't have formaldehyde and everything to make the body last longer that way. But no, what it's talking about is composting bodies, treating them like you would fertilizer or something, where you use it to grow new things. And so now that I understand that, it's very clear why the church is against this, in a few reasons. And actually, the opposition to it, the New York bishops as well as the bishops in Washington have both spoken out about this idea. And one of the things they talk about is that it creates emotional distance. You want a place you can go and pray for the deceased person. You want to be able to go to a graveside, or in the case of cremation, to an urn or something where you can have a physical connection with the person. This is a deep-rooted part of the human experience. Even non-believers do this, but it's certainly true in Catholicism. Think about relics and everything else. We really treat the body of the deceased person as something to be treated with reverence. But then separate and related to that, there's no sacred place. This isn't done in a church. This is or in a Catholic cemetery. This is just basically what you would do if you put a body in a dumpster. And I'm struck in reading this by the lengths to which we go. So New Hampshire Public Radio has a true crime series called something Creek, Bear Creek or something like this, and it's about these bodies that were discovered decomposing in a barrel, and they moved heaven and earth to not only find the killer. They found the killer within time, but even after that, to find out who they were so they could give them a proper burial. And that speaks to a really deep-seated kind of human intuition that it's right and it's good, that we should treat the body of people that are, people have this innate dignity, and they don't just become trash when they die. So because of all of that, I'm glad to have the chance to kind of correct the record. I didn't understand the nature of what was being asked about. That's why we don't just recycle our bodies.
The number's 888-318-7884, and now every line is full. 2 minutes ago, there was nobody on the line, and now every line's full, so now I got to make you work again, Joe. Let's go up to, I think this is Washington. Yeah, Washington State, listening on Modern Day Radio. Chris, you there with us, Chris?
Hello?
Hello. Hi, Chris. You're on the air with Joe and Cy.
Hi, Joe. How are you today? How are you, sir? Cy?
Very well. Thank you.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, so I am not currently a Catholic. I am thinking about becoming Catholic, though.
So there is a chance. Okay.
There is a chance. However, there's one thing that I have a problem with, and I want to know exactly what the Catholic Church's stance is on this.
Okay.
I have friends that are Catholic, and my concern is that the Catholic Church puts Mary in a position higher than Jesus. And my question is how does that work, and is that so? Because I grew up in a non-denominational Christian church, but the Bible says that we're to have no other gods before Him. And when we pray to God the Father through the Son and the power of the Holy Spirit, talking about the Trinity. So I understand and I agree with a lot of things that the Catholic Church teaches and talks about. I don't necessarily know everything about it, but this is something that I'm trying to learn more about.
All right.
And
let's let Joe take a crack at it, and we'll come back and see if he's satisfied.
I think that's a really good question. I appreciate the the humility and respect with which you approach it too. And I am grateful for the opportunity to clarify. We don't think Mary is a god. We don't think she's a goddess. We don't think she's above Christ or equal to Christ. We think there is, in fact, an infinite gap in terms of their holiness, not because of any defect on the part of Mary. We think she's sinless, and we think she is the holiest of all of God's creatures, but that she is nevertheless a creature, and he is the creator. He's the author of holiness. And so no creature, by definition, could be his equal. And this is the explicit teaching of the Catholic Church. Lumen Gentium, one of the Second Vatican Council's documents, talks about this and says explicitly, no creature could ever be counted as equal with the incarnate Word and Redeemer. That Jesus is not a creature, Mary is. And there you have the enormous chasm. One is creator, one is creature. And so think about like Adam and Eve in the garden. Adam and Eve in the garden are sinless, but that doesn't make them equal with God. They have all of these graces and preternatural gifts that they lose with the fall, but that doesn't make them equal with God. There's still an infinite gap in kind of the honor owed to them. And so the church distinguishes these types of honor in three ways. Dulia is the normal word for honor. Like if I want to honor you, if I want to, applaud you for the good work you do, or, that's dulia. And what we give to Mary, we call hyperdulia, which is just like honor on steroids. And what we give to God is latria. That's divine worship. That's not just like a little more dulia. That's something different in kind. Like if you say, Happy Mother's Day, Mom, you're the greatest mom ever. You're not worried that you're about to worship your mom because like your language is so exalted, because you realize that the kind of thing you're doing in honoring a human creature is just not the kind of thing you're doing when you're praying to the living God and honoring him as God. And if it is, then you need to change how you're praying because you're not giving God enough credit. Like if your image of God is just like a slightly better version than us, that's too small of a God. That the actual God is related to Mary in the way that infinity is related to like a billion. It's not that a billion's almost there. It's like, no. They might seem like that from the perspective of like one. Real down low here in the same way that like every adult looks tall to a toddler. It can seem like Mary's at the same height as Jesus, but there is in fact an infinite gap. So we certainly look up to Mary. We use her as our model. We respect her. She's our mother in faith. And Revelation 12:17 presents her as the mother of all those who believe in Jesus. And so we go to her as a mother, but in the same way that we don't go to our mother as like a goddess or a replacement to Jesus, she points us to Jesus. Her last words in the gospel are in the Gospel of John at the wedding feast of Cana. And she points believers to Jesus. And she says to the servants there, do whatever he tells you. And that's, I think, the word Mary has for every one of us today. Does that help? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I understand. So I do understand what you're saying. I wasn't 100% clear about that before because nobody could really give me a good answer to it. And that's why I was asking that question, because one of the things I take into when I'm as a Christian, when I was growing up as a child, I understood that Jesus is God. Mm-hmm. But you have to be careful not to. You have to be very careful not to put anything above him or in that position. And that was my concern. And because I've got a couple of my friends are like, oh well, we have to pray the rosary and we have to do this, and I'm like, okay, well, why are we praying and doing the rosary, praying to Mary, not to God, to Jesus?
Yeah, that's a great question.
They couldn't give me they couldn't give me an answer on that.
Yes, this is built on this idea that we are the body of Christ and that we are supposed to be praying for one another and going to one another with our concerns and our difficulties. And so if I've got an issue with something, I'm going to go to you and you'll go to me. or that's ideally how it should happen. 1 Corinthians 2, verse 1, wherein St. Paul talks about praying for everyone. And he asks people for prayers, right? And so it's not wrong to honor Mary. It's not wrong to ask her for our prayers. And none of that are we worshiping her. None of that are we treating her as a goddess. We're treating her as a good Christian. We're treating her as someone who's followed Christ faithfully. Blessed is she who believed that what was said to her would come about, like as Elizabeth says in Luke 1. That's what we're treating her as. Like, she's a model disciple. She shows us what faith looks like better than anyone else in history. Like, she trusts God and takes him at his word. And so that's why we go to her, because she's a model of what it is to follow Jesus, not because we think that she's above Jesus or anything of the sort.
I got to leave it there because I got to take a break. But Chris, I'll tell you what I'd like to do if you would like it. We have a little booklet called 20 Answers on Mary. And I'd be happy to send that to you if you'd like. Just hang on the line, and Edgar will get your address, and we'll put that book in the mail for you. But I am late for the break, so I got to do that. It's open forum for new Catholics. And if you are a new Catholic and you've got a question, give us a call, 888-318-7884.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Demete and Aaron Richards is our show for young adults.
Everybody's talking about encounter. Everybody's talking about that mountaintop experience. What we fail to often talk about is what happens after, what happens beyond that Damascus moment.
Jesus Christ is calling all of us to be missionary disciples, disciples of Jesus who are on mission to bring the kingdom of God here and now on this earth.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Demete and Aaron Richards, Saturday at 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. We had so much fun this year talking to folks who are about to come into the Catholic Church and then folks who are recently in the Catholic Church. And we thought we'd just keep doing it during Easter season. And Easter season officially ends with Pentecost. Right, Joe?
Yeah. So we're still, we're enjoying the twilight of the Easter season.
But Pentecost is Sunday. I think Sunday is Pentecost
That's right.
Sunday, right?
It's on a Sunday this year.
All right. So, no, Pentecost Sunday is always on Sunday. I'm just saying I think it's this Sunday.
Yes.
Good Lord. Well, it's not that much of a joke because Ascension Thursday isn't always on Thursday.
That's true. Actually, my mom tells a story about, I think it was her aunt who was looking at a calendar and said, "Hey, Easter's on a Sunday this year."
You know what's the worst for parishes? I never knew this until I worked with the church, is when Christmas is on a Sunday. Do you know why that's the worst?
Yeah. Just because of Mass obligation?
No, because I hate to say this, but they lose an entire Sunday of collections.
Oh.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're like...
well, it's complicated when Christmas is on a Saturday because of the liturgical scheduling gets to be really confusing.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Because you have like the Vigil Mass for Sunday and
right.
That, all of that just gets messy.
It's open forum for new Catholics. We'll go down to Texas now. Eric in Texas, listening on Red Sea Catholic Radio. Glad to have you, Eric. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi, thanks. Good to be on. I am trying to understand the Hail Holy Queen. There's some verbiage in there that I think it describes St. Mary as our life and our sweetness. And then I also read from the Bible that Christ is our life. So I'm trying to understand the relationship between these two concepts, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. I had the identical problem you had with that prayer of like, wait a second.
Yeah.
It seems like you're giving to Mary these things that properly belong to Christ. And part of my comfort was realizing the church has always done this with herself. Jesus describes himself as the way, the truth, and the life. And the church, even in the book of Acts, starts referring to herself as the way because of her unity with Christ. And that, it's not like, well, there's one way with Jesus and one way with the church. Like, no, it's one and the same way. And so likewise, we could even talk about Mary as the way, as long as we understood that to mean Mary is pointing us to Christ, not as some separate way apart from him. That is not the way we normally speak. And certainly Protestants don't normally speak that way. But so that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is that there's some poetic kind of exaggeration going on. And you find this all over the Bible. So, for instance, in 1 Samuel, after David kills Goliath, the women go out singing, and they say, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Well, David hadn't literally slain tens of thousands. He killed one guy. But they're using a recognized mode of speech that was giving honor to someone in an exaggerated way. That's not dishonesty. And that kind of exaggeration, you find it all across like Mediterranean cultures, including in Israel, including at the lips of our Lord. In Matthew 18, when Jesus says, if your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it from you, because it's better to enter into life maimed or lame than to be thrown with 2 hands and 2 feet into the eternal fire. Now, he's not literally telling you to maim yourself. And so someone who took all of that very literally would be misunderstanding the Bible, would be misunderstanding what Jesus means. Exaggeration is okay, as long as it's clear, like, what do you mean by this? And so when we say Mary's our life, our sweetness, and our hope, we mean that like we're holding her up and we're venerating her, not as a rival to Christ or as a replacement of Christ, but as an embodiment of what it is to live the Christian life. And so I gave the example to the last caller, like on Mother's Day, if you get a cup for your mom that says world's greatest mom, or for your wife or whoever, you don't mean that literally. But if you tried to figure out like what place she fell in the rankings in the world, that would be a disaster. I don't think you would not be making her day if you said like world's like 33rd tier, like, she made the 33rd percentile in terms of best mom. Like, no, you're not making her happy on Mother's Day. That mode of exaggeration is appropriate to devotional language. Last thing there, St. John Henry Newman talks about this, and he makes this point that like he's British, and so not prone to this kind of emotional, exaggerated sort of speech in the way that like the Italians are, or the Jews in the first century. And so he gives the example that you don't want to treat a love poem as a police report. In other words, you need to understand the kind of thing that like a prayer isn't supposed to be a cold description of things. It's supposed to be a way of like getting the heart to kind of aspire in a deeper way. And so we want this kind of non-literal, even intentionally exaggerated language. But understandably, it's okay if it rubs you the wrong way. Certainly at first, like it's still kind of foreign and kind of alien to a lot of people.
Eric?
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the point of the prayer, too, is to ask Mary to show us Jesus and to pray for us. Those are the two things we ask for in that prayer. But I kind of share Eric's sense of this. I really like the old, Greek church prayers from the early days. They just were so precise in their theology. I find those easier to pray sometimes than the very kind of romantic later Latin prayers.
Yeah, there's something to that, but we don't want to exaggerate it. I mean, for instance, the oldest known Marian prayer is the Sub Tuum Praesidium, which is, I think, back to like the 200s or 300s. And that's in terms of like the oldest scrap we have. The prayer itself may be even older. And it says, beneath your compassion, we take refuge, O Theotokos, O God-bearer. Do not despise our petitions in time of trouble, but rescue us from danger, only pure, only blessed one. Now, is Mary the only pure one? Of course not. Jesus.
Yeah.
So we find that even in the oldest Marian prayers, going back to before Constantine, going back to like when Christianity was still in the catacombs, they had this kind of relationship to Mary.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. Okay, Eric?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. God bless you, Eric. Thank you very much. I'm not getting so much time to chat because I'm just keep looking down and all the phone lines are full. So Our prayers from the callers were answered, but there's a lot of people to get to. So let's go to Mike in Rochester, New York, listening on the Station of the Cross. Mike, go ahead with your question for Joe Heschmeyer.
Hi, thank you very much. If a person commits a mortal sin and makes a personal confession with sincerity, humility, repentance to God, is that mortal sin forgiven equally as if you had gone to confession and confessed the same mortal sin to a priest?
Yes, provided. It's a very good question. I want to quote to you from the Catechism here. And it's section on contrition, which is section 1451 following. It talks about the distinction between what's called perfect contrition and what's sometimes called attrition or imperfect contrition. Perfect contrition is when you turn away from sin out of love of God. And if you do that and you're contrite because you love God and therefore hate your sin, you're forgiven. And it explicitly says it obtains forgiveness of mortal sins if it includes the firm resolution to have recourse to sacramental confession as soon as possible. In other words, a Catholic who is genuinely sorry for their sin knows they need to go to confession as soon as they can. They're not going to just drag their feet on it. They're not going to treat sacramental confession as irrelevant. So it's not meant to be a replacement for the sacrament. And this for a few reasons. One, it's very hard to know if you have perfect contrition, because you could have attrition, which is just turning away from sin because you don't like the consequences or because you fear hell. Those are fine in terms of being a clearing of the bar needed to go to the sacrament. But in terms of the kind of infusion of charity that forgives sin, it's hard to know if you have that. And second, when we sin, we hurt both God and the church. That every sin tears down the body of Christ a little bit. And so it's appropriate to go and make amends by going to a representative both of Christ and of the church, namely the priest. And it's good not to be the judge in your own case. Let the priest tell you. Maybe he'll say, that thing you thought was a sin wasn't even a sin. Or you're maybe being too easy on yourself, and conversely, and can give you an appropriate penance. You don't want to be left being your own judge. So for all those reasons, it's good, even if you have perfect contrition, to then go to sacramental confession as soon as possible. And if you don't, if you're taking, I'm really sorry, I don't need to go to confession, as kind of an excuse, that's probably a sign you don't have the necessary contrition for your sin.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. I think we can get another call in. We're at Stephen in Cape Coral, Florida, watching on YouTube. Can you be kind of quick with your question for Joe?
Yeah, thank you both very much for the response. I think I characterized kind of as a toddler. I read an article once that said that shelf life for a Catholic convert was 5.5 years. So I'm right about the 5.5 year mark, and I'm very serious about it. But I feel myself caught between some of the more traditional catechesis sort of Catholicism, the Greek sort of precision thinking you were referencing a minute ago, and some of the more romantic, sentimental Catholicism that I'm finding in some of the more local congregations I'm going to. So I'm getting discouraged between modernism and traditionalism, I think is how I would characterize it. And wanted to know if you had any words that would encourage a Protestant convert who wants to stay Catholic but finds that I'm actually more Catholic than a lot of the priests and congregations I'm attending.
Well, does
that make sense?
It makes sense to me. We're not going to answer this question quickly, though. It wouldn't be fair. Can you just hang on a couple minutes, and we'll take our break, and then we'll come back and do it, because we're not.
That's quite the teaser for the second hour.
Is that all right, Stephen? Can you hang on?
No, I'd be very grateful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, please do hang on. It's a wonderful, wonderful question. Plus, we'll get to hear a little bit of your story, and we wouldn't be able to if we rushed Joe through an answer. So my bad on that one. But Joe, you're coming back next hour. I know you're coming back because I see your name on the schedule. And Stephen's going to hang on, and we will continue with our open forum for new Catholics There's 2 lines open right now as we head into the break. So if you're a new Catholic and there's something you'd like to ask about, and this is a fascinating one. It was Stephen, 5.5 years, been Catholic, and there's this discouragement creeping in. Perfect. This is exactly what this show is for. But maybe there are other things having to do with things that you're experiencing in the Catholic Church for the first time. Whatever the question, it's welcome here. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Having a good time with Joe Heschmeyer. It's hard not to have a good time with Joe Heschmeyer. He's an awful good guy. He only has one flaw, and you know what that flaw is, Joe Heschmeyer, don't you? Your one flaw that drives me crazy.
Bad choice of friends and coworkers?
No, that is not it. You've made excellent choices of your friends and coworkers.
I'm trying to think. You insulted my marriage last time.
No, your marriage is lovely. I just don't have any interest in it.
Please go ahead.
No, come on. You know the thing that drives me crazy about you. You know what it is.
That I allegedly bully you?
No, not that you... No. I'm surprised.
You're making me list all of my faults? This is genius.
I'm going to let you... I actually didn't think of it. I didn't think this through, but it is kind of fun.
Not that one. Not that one.
Well, if I say it, you're going to know. You're going to be like,
humility.
Yes, your excessive humility. Yep, that's the thing. Okay, we're leaving it there. The number is 888-31-TRUTH, and it's open forum for those who are new to the Catholic Church, and you define that however you like. If you are new, came in this year at the RCIA, maybe came in another way, maybe came in recent years, and you've ended up with a question or questions that you'd like to throw out at Joe, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Joe is the author of a bunch of books, including A Man Named Joseph, Guardian for Our Times. He's also the author of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. And give me some more, Joe.
Pope Peter?
Pope Peter, that's the one I was looking for.
And then Who Am I, Lord? Finding Your Identity in Christ.
Yes, with the beautiful El Greco on the front of it.
Mm-hmm. That means the Greco.
The Greek. It means the Greek.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm teaching you something. Like it actually means the Greek. Okay, whatever.
It's all Greek to me.
There it is. That was pretty close.
Oh yeah, the puns.
The puns. That's your worst quality. Is the constant, relentless, never-ending punning.
Yeah, no. And you and everyone around me agree.
Yeah, right. Does everyone that knows you have the same pet peeve about you?
Oh yeah. The dad jokes are full grown.
You have a wonderful sense of humor, and I'm virtually a perfect person. Like everybody loves everything about Joe, but everyone rolls their eyes at the puns. Like, are you kidding me with the puns?
And it does. It does zero to deter. It only seems to feed it.
You are undeterrable in this. You are. You can't be stopped. All right. Go ahead.
But we had Stephen on the line, so I feel like we should get back to him soon. Although I love talking about myself and my flaws.
I was just going to go back to the line, but I thought you were going to throw a pun in there. Stephen in Cape Coral, Florida. And he's been a Catholic for 5.5 years and caught between the modernists and the traditionalists in the church and feeling discouraged and out of place. Does that get to it, Stephen, the question that you have?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I appreciate that, and I do want to also add that I think that it's a sign of intellect to be able to use a pun. So good for Joe.
Thanks.
I don't want to take Stephen's call now. Don't encourage him. This is a problem the man has. All right.
No worries. The challenge is, I think I've always been a Catholic, and then I went off and became a Methodist pastor for a number of years before I converted to the Catholic Church. And I was thinking at the time that I was making an intelligent decision for authority and discipline and tradition. And now I'm finding myself 5.5 years down the road, not ungrateful that our Lord has led me in a path of the true faith, and I'm grateful for my Catholicism. I'm a humble man who makes mistakes, and I don't always understand things. But because of that, and because of my background, I've spent a lot of time trying to study Catholicism and develop a culture of Catholicism in my home and my life. But I'm finding myself growing increasingly at odds with the Catholic churches in my area, who are actually becoming, in appearance at least, and in some practice, more Protestant than I was when I was a Protestant.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that requires a lot of qualification and it's generalization. So I'm careful of that. So I turn to sometimes social media to try and find my home, and that's become a rabbit hole that can become very evil very quickly. So I find myself kind of wondering, well, why did I leave Protestantism to come to an authoritarianism that doesn't seem to be consistent in its faith? I'm a little confused and growing discouraged, and I think it's probably because I've lost the romance of the conversion, but anything you can say to help me, I would be grateful for.
Yeah, I love the way you kind of present that, because I think it really strikes, especially the last thing you said about losing the romance, because that's what I was thinking as you were describing it, that a lot of people have this experience in marriage, that you meet someone, she seems amazing, and you go through marriage prep, and it seems like all of your problems are already talked out, and then you get married, and it's like, wait a second, what did I sign up for here? I don't have this experience. My wife does, but
only because of the punning.
Yeah, exactly. It's just been a constant punishment. So it is. I can't. It's compulsive. But no, in all seriousness, like the happily ever after that we can kind of build up in our minds, both with marriage and with the church, is something that can be a real attraction, but can also be a little bit of an idol. It can be a little bit of an illusion, and it's something that God will eventually smash. And it's easy to imagine a church where everything goes well, or to demand that, and that's just never been the case. It's not just that like things are tough right now, but that if you read church history, things were tough pretty consistently. St. Basil has a fantastic letter talking about the crazy chaos in the church following the Council of Nicaea. He compares it to a naval battle where everyone is just attacking everyone around them, and they're all just tearing each other down, and it seems like heresy is going to win, and it doesn't. Like Nicaea, we look back on it now and say, oh, that was like a golden age in the church. There was so much clarity and orthodoxy and everything worked out. But living amidst that, it was crazy and confusing, and there were heretics on the left and right, and it was a mess. And so that's something to bear in mind. Like, then coupled with that, think about the tax collector and the Pharisee, right? The Pharisee is talking about how great he is, and the tax collector is just saying, Lord, have pity on me, a sinner. And that's what we are called to really have that, like be more aware of our own sins than we are of the sins of the person in the pew next to us, more aware of our own sins than we are of the sins of the pastor, even if we do occasionally have to speak up to protest if something is going seriously wrong. We shouldn't let it lead us to spiritual pride. So I'd say watch out for despair, watch out for pride. Give voice as needed. Don't give in to discouragement. Know that we've been here before as a church. Even if you haven't, the church has, and that things have worked out in the end to those who persevered in the face of what is undoubtedly a serious trial. I feel your pain with this. So I think within that framework, build intentional community. As you said, social media can be good or bad. Watch out for social media that just makes you angry or embittered or discouraged, or that just constantly talks about like the bad news. But rather find people who really uphold what's good, true, and beautiful and go there. This is very much St. Paul's advice, right? Like find that which is uplifting, avoid that which just tears you down, because it's not good for you spiritually to have that much of it in your diet. Yeah, like when appropriate, have hard conversations with your neighbor, with your pastor. Then the last thing I'd say here is to really try to withhold judgment, even of people who seem like they might be heretics, even of people who seem like they might be short-shifting the Catholic faith for something more Protestant. That oftentimes these are people who never were exposed to or understood the fullness of the Catholic Church, fullness of the Catholic truth, and they are doing what they can with the resources they have. Sunrise and sunset look the same. And you can't always tell if someone is in the process of leaving the faith or in the process of like maybe coming into it in a fuller way, unless you know a lot more about their story. So some of the people who may be like most messy as Catholics are the ones God is just like actively working on in a kind of a real and beautiful way. So we should give that as much space as we can for God to do his thing. I know even with all of that like I haven't gotten rid of the hard problems facing you, and I don't think I can. But those would be the principles I'd maybe try to keep in mind while I tried to, both in person and online, cultivate a community of uplifting Catholics who take the faith seriously. Does that help at all, Stephen?
Yeah, that was helpful, and I especially appreciate your analogy of the sunrise and the sunset. I do thank you for that. I ask you for your prayers, and please know that both of you have mine.
Thank you.
And I hope you overcome your pun addiction. And thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. You know what? I don't know if you've got Joe's new book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, but if you want to hang on, I'd love to send you a copy of it. I just think it's a great book, and you sound like someone who would enjoy it if you haven't got it. So hang on. I have to go to the break. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. It's open forum for new Catholics. If you fall into that category, you've got a question, we're here to answer them. 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting support provided by Homeschool Connections. Homeschool Connections hosts the Catholic Homeschool Conference. The 2022 Catholic Homeschool Conference is June 10th through 11th, and the website is CatholicHomeschoolConference.com. That's CatholicHomeschoolConference.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features daily Mass, prayers, articles, and meditations in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at Magnificat.com.
Hello, Father Mitch.
Yes, sir. What can we do for you?
How do we know that Jesus was in his early 30s during his ministry?
In Luke, he says, and Jesus was about 30 years old. So it's right there.
Okay, thank you. That was easier than I thought.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Underwriting by Great Catholic Music.
Great Catholic Music, your one-of-a-kind streaming platform for traditional Catholic hymns and contemporary favorites 24 hours a day. Music that soothes the soul, that's safe for the whole family to listen to. What a relief. Great Catholic Music. Download the free mobile app or listen on any Alexa-enabled device or write from your PC or tablet at greatcatholicmusic.com. Great Catholic Music. Melodies for the soul.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Joe Heschmeyer, our guest, and lots of folks still on the line, new Catholics. If you're a new Catholic, there's one line open if you want to get on that line, and we'll get to your question, 888-318-7884. Next we go up to Jamestown, New York. Jubal watching on Twitch in Jamestown. Jubal, you there with us?
I am. Hello.
Hello. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Okay. So I have been raised in a very devout Baptist family. When I was about 3 years old, my father left the church we were attending and started his own church in our living room. So I have been, I don't know if I would definitely say I was sheltered, but they exposed me to certain ideas of different faiths, but not until about a year ago when I didn't feel spiritually fed in that environment, so I have started attending other churches in the area, including a Catholic church a couple times, and a lot of my preconceptions of the church have completely fallen away, and I guess I'm now on an exploration of where exactly is the truth. My desire is to follow Christ in the best way I possibly can. I've been listening a lot to, I think you talked with him recently, Cameron Bertuzzi, and I've been listening to his own journey. And I guess I'm on a fairly similar path. I have a certain desire to become Catholic. Like, I like the beauty, the ceremony, and like a lot of the things such as that. But then I have some hesitancies, such as like the idea of Mary is I'm very skeptical of still. And I guess I'm just wondering how I proceed from here. And my desire, one of my concerns about my desire for Catholicism, I guess, is that am I desiring the ceremony and the enjoyment of that, or am I truly desiring to get closer to Christ?
We Catholics we always say both. That's the answer. With Catholics, the answer always comes down to both. But Joe, go ahead.
Well, no, I think that was such a beautiful witness. And I don't know if you heard the prior caller, but if you really want to find out which one it is, it sounds like you go to church down in Cape Coral. Just because he was saying the liturgy wasn't maybe all it was supposed to be. I've never been to Cape Coral. Please, if you're a priest in Cape Coral, don't have your feelings hurt by that. But no, in all seriousness, that's a beautiful thing, and it's good that your soul is resonating with the truth and the goodness and the beauty. Like, if we take seriously that God is true, good, and beautiful, then our worship of him should be true, it should be good, and it should be beautiful. And for your soul to respond to that is not a defect. It just shows that it's attuned in the way it should be. In the same way that if you heard some preaching that was really true, you wouldn't say, well, am I attracted to this because I'm growing closer to Christ or because I'm drawing closer to the truth? It's like, well, both. And so, yeah, it's true someone could go to Mass just for aesthetic reasons. I don't think many people do that. I think even people who might look like that on the outside are searching for God and finding him there, even if they maybe can't put it that articulately. It's beautiful that you're on this journey, and I just want to really stress that. I can suggest a couple resources. So I think you want to do a few things. One, the big question to answer is not do I agree with this or that church teaching, but is the church who she says she is? Just like with Jesus Christ, the question isn't, what do I think of the Sermon on the Mount? Do I agree with all that stuff about peacemakers? It's, is Jesus who he says he is or not? Because if he is, well, I'd better agree with him, whether I would on my own lights or not. If he isn't, then I'm not that interested in whether he happened to get some stuff about peacemakers right. It's a one-question sort of examination. And likewise with the Catholic Church, he said, upon this rock I'll build my church. Well, is that the church your dad started in his living room, or that Martin Luther started, or is there something older and ancient that we're actually supposed to be part of, something that goes all the way back to him? If the answer to that is yes, we should all be Catholic, and all the other stuff falls in place. If the answer to that is no, well, none of us should bother being Catholic at all. And so in that sense, it's a lot easier than trying to sort out the answers of every particular doctrinal issue you can think of. To that end, I will selfishly recommend my own book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, that tries to answer that question positively. And I also wrote a book called Pope Peter that looks at the role of the papacy particularly, because if the papacy is true, then Catholicism is true and the rest follows. But I also recommend a few other books. Why We're Catholic by my friend and colleague Trent Horn, which explains why we're Catholic. There's also a book called The Belief of Catholics by a guy by the name of Monsignor Ronald Knox that does a really good job of just kind of unpacking in a sort of systematic but still really easy to follow kind of way the basic, why do we believe in God? Why do we believe in Jesus? Why do we believe in the Catholic Church? He kind of goes in that order. If you've ever read Mere Christianity, it's sort of a similar approach, a similar style, but specifically from a Catholic approach. So I think those would be good things to do in terms of reading, but none of that is going to replace the need to actually, build a community where you are and get to know the priest and hopefully find someone who can be a good spiritual guide on the way so that you're not trying to shepherd yourself and someone else can help lead you into the church if that is where God is in fact calling you. Does that help, Jubal? Does that make any sense? Oh, sorry, I think I was going to add something.
No, I was just going to ask that, just what you asked. I want to see what the reaction was. Jubal, go ahead.
That helps a lot, actually. I don't know a whole lot of Catholics, so I have, this journey has been completely independent and online, so it's very encouraging to, actually talk to some people, and I really appreciate it, and that made a lot of sense.
Would you feel comfortable going to a Catholic church and just sitting through a Mass, or would you not feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I have done that a couple times.
Okay.
My main concern with that is my parents often ask me where I've been going to church, and
that wouldn't go over, huh?
It wouldn't be horrible, but it would certainly be awkward.
Yeah, it's certainly a longer commute time than when it was in your living room.
Yes, definitely.
Jubal, if you want a copy of Joe's book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, we'll send it to you. Can we send it in a wrapper that doesn't? I'm just kidding. We can't do that. But if you want to hang on, and Edgar will get your information. All right, Jubal?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I hope we get to talk again. The number here is 888-318-7884. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. We're talking with new Catholics. But actually, we've ended up talking to quite a few people who are kind of not even new Catholics yet. They're still considering. They're still weighing their options, which is fine. It's made for great conversation.
Great. Yeah.
Let's go to Catherine in Oxford, Michigan, listening to EWTN on channel 130 Sirius XM satellite radio. Catherine, welcome. Got a question for Joe?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I did have a question. The Shroud of Turin, on the Shroud of Turin, the nails in Jesus are in the wrist area, and I've listened to a couple shows on your channel, and they believe the Shroud of Turin is true. But some of the saints who have stigmata, and they have their stigmata in their palms. So I believe in God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit completely. But if the shroud is correct, then wouldn't saints not have stigmata in their wrists? I mean, in their palms, but in their wrists?
That's a great question. And I can only tell you some possibilities because I don't know the answer to that for sure. I can say that there are like 3 theories about where Jesus was crucified in terms of the location of the nails. The palm is one spot. There's also a little spot at the base of the palm, like right where the hand meets the arm, that there's a little soft spot right there in the middle. That's another possibility. And then the bone in like the end of the wrist. And one complicating factor is when it comes to the shroud, even assuming that it's authentic, and I know there's a debate about that, we're getting the back of the hand, and so it may be that the nail went in the palm and came out closer to the wrist. There's to say a lot of ambiguity about this, and it seems that Roman crucifixion practices varied in terms of exactly where the nail would have gone in. I don't think that in the stigmata we're getting a special divine revelation of exactly where the nail went in. And so most of the stigmatists, like you said, Padre Pio, Francis of Assisi, and so on, have the stigmata on their hands as opposed to on the wrist. It's supposed to be a way of sharing in the suffering of Christ, including the sort of humiliation of the stigmata, which is, stigma and stigmata are related terms. Like there's something about that. So if it, let's say hypothetically, that Jesus was actually crucified with the nail going more in his wrist than in his hand. But if Christian art for 2,000 years has shown it in the hand, a wound on the wrist isn't going to recall the cross, even if it turned out to be more biologically accurate. And so the point of the stigmata, of drawing us towards Christ and reminding us of his suffering, still seems like it makes sense with it being in the palm. So I don't think there's any contradiction between the possibility that the wrist is where the nail went and with the fact that people still have the stigmata on the hand. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Well, I hope you're on the right way to figuring that out. I hope that's true.
I hope so too. We often have that feeling with Joe. Like, I hope he's right. The answer was good. I hope he's right about that one.
Yeah, I didn't even get into this. If there is a contradiction between them, I would trust more in the stigmata of canonized saints like Padre Pio and Francis of Assisi, because they're the infallible certainty that these people were holy accompanies them. With something like the Shroud of Turin, it's a really fascinating item. And I'm inclined to think that it's real, and I've been to see it, and it certainly seems real. It blows my mind to imagine how a forgery would even work with 15th century technology. But we don't have the kind of infallible certainty that we do with like the canonizations. So I think they can both be believed in. I believe in both, but I think if you had to choose one or the other, I would trust the saints.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So you're new to the Catholic Church. When did you come into the Catholic Church?
Well, actually, I was raised Catholic, and I've been out of the church for a very long time.
Oh.
My dad was a deacon in the Catholic Church for 30-something years. He's 81 years old right now, and he quit Catholicism 2 years ago. And when I thought, oh my gosh, I need to get me back to the Catholic Church, and I need to get my dad back to the Catholic Church, because I don't know, it seemed harder for me to have him lose faith in the Catholic Church than for me to lose faith in the Catholic Church,
Wow,
because he believed in it.
Can I tell you a secret, Catherine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God does that. He'll use the bonds of human affection and the basic avenues of charity in the heart to really draw us towards him. Like a lot of people, like when they have a child, they suddenly get serious about religion because they think, I don't want my child to be lost. They need this in their life. And so they do things for their loved ones they would never do for themselves. And it's almost like God is teaching us something about, like, maybe we don't love ourselves enough to take him seriously sometimes. But he'll use the people we do love more.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you and your dad doing?
Oh, I love my dad. He's one of the greatest men in my eyes. But it hurts me that he left the Catholic Church, though.
Well, I'm sure many people are praying for him right now.
I want him back.
Yeah, we'll keep him in our prayers. Okay, Catherine?
Tell him he can call in anytime as well.
Oh, thank you.
All right, right back with more Joe.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Tomorrow on More to Life, how can I help?
Are you struggling to get the help or support you need? We'll help you find your voice.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Having a good time talking with folks who are new to the Catholic Church. In some cases recently returned to the Catholic Church, in some cases so new that they haven't actually even officially entered the Catholic Church yet. But if you're new to the Catholic Church and you got questions, we'd love to have that conversation with you. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Darren and I were talking today, Joe, and we've liked doing these shows so much. I was thinking maybe the day after Labor Day, or right after the official summer is over here in America, that we would do what do I got to do to get into the church, to try to encourage people to go to RCIA, because a lot of RCIA sometimes they'll do summer stuff, but they really get going in September, and not everywhere, but in a lot of places. So you want to be the guest on that one? What do I got to do to get into the Catholic Church?
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. That actually sounds
it's just going to be me telling people for 2 hours, go to RCA.
Yeah, go to... Yeah, but actually that does... I don't think this show is going to work. Forget it, Darren. Forget it. It's canceled. Gary in Texas is next. Like, really, seriously, now that I think about it, there's only one answer to that. Get baptized. Like, what are we going to say that to every single person who calls?
Well, maybe get confirmed. Maybe get an annulment.
I see what you're saying. Gary in Texas.
But well, go ahead.
I keep repeating Gary's name. He's probably like, are they going to get to me or not? Gary in Texas, listening on Ave Maria Radio. You are up next. Gary, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Well, thanks for taking my call, fellas. I've listened to Catholic Answers, I guess, for about 3 years.
Oh, wonderful.
And I just actually came into the church on the Easter Vigil, so I'm happy about that.
Well, we're happy about it, too. God bless you.
Okay, my question is that on the rosary, it seems that it's a repetitive prayer, and I just wonder why we have the repetitive prayer that we're saying the same thing over and over again. It just seems like if you just said it once, that would be enough, rather than saying it several times. So I don't know the reason for the need for the repetition.
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially because, Jesus talks about not having vain repetitions in Matthew 6, and a lot of people have taken that to mean that repetitive prayer itself is bad, which is not what he's saying at all there. It's worth pointing out that Jesus does repetitive prayer. Not only can you find some really repetitive psalms in the book of Psalms, and we know that he prayed those, but in the Garden of Gethsemane, he goes and prays the same thing 3 times in a row. And so I think you could ask the same question, like, well, why didn't he just pray it one time? And I think the answer is because something with the intensity of heart. There's a really mysterious line in Matthew 6, and people who've heard me on the show have probably heard me mention this because I find it really fascinating, where before giving the Our Father, Jesus talks about how our Father already knows what we want before we pray for it. And the efficiency part of my brain is just like, okay, great. So I don't need to pray because God already knows what I want and need, so he'll just take care of it. But that's not what comes next. He doesn't say, so therefore don't pray. He then gives us a prayer to pray, and actual results can follow from it. And that prayer, the Our Father, we know the early Christians prayed it repeatedly. In the Didache, which dates back to the 1st century, there's an explicit instruction to pray it 3 times daily because you want to constantly be drawing your mind to Christ. I would view that as more of a minimum than a maximum, right? If you get in the habit of at least having 3 times in the day where you're doing the Our Father, that's good. The Rosary, if you do that, has 6 Our Fathers between the beginning and the 5 decades. So your bases are covered there. And so repetitive prayer from the beginning is about the need to constantly draw our mind back to God. There's also, I think, a really practical element. So the original 3 series of rosaries, joyful, sorrowful, and glorious, there's 150 Hail Marys corresponding to the 150 Psalms. So the monks would pray the 150 Psalms, and lay people who maybe didn't have the ability to read, or maybe were in the world where they didn't have a book of Psalms with them, could still pray 150 prayers. And so the repetition there has a really pragmatic benefit of being a prayer you can pray 150 times if you did, all 15 decades. Because it's something you'd have to have something you could memorize. If you tried to say, memorize these 150 different prayers, you would just be saying, okay, you're never going to memorize this. So memorized prayer is a good thing. Jesus gives us prayers to memorize. The Psalms are prayers we can memorize. Those things exist for our benefit. St. John Henry Newman gives the example that if you were going to go before a king, you would probably have prepared remarks. You wouldn't just wing it when you got there. And so likewise, the church gives us prepared prayers, and Jesus gives us prepared prayers so that we can go before the King of Kings and have something to say. That doesn't mean we shouldn't also wing it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't also just pour out our heart in whatever way, but it's good to have formal, structured prayers, and it's good to pray them continually so that our mind is constantly turning back to Christ every time we start to wander off. What is that? Okay. Does that help at all, Gary?
Yeah, it does quite a bit. I mean, the fact that it draws you back to God kind of more or less gets you back into thinking that. And so I think those are good answers.
Gary, I'd like to send you a little booklet if you wanted. We have a 20 Answers book on prayer. It's called 20 Answers Prayer. If you'd like that, hang on and Edgar will get your information, all right?
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. It's great talking with you, Gary. Look at that. Line's filled up again, though. It's like when it rains, it pours. You sound like you're going to say something.
Well, it's been feast and famine. I love it. It's like, hey, there's nobody on the call. Oh, all the lines are full.
I know, it's strange, yeah.
It's like one person. Now all the lines are full again. It's great. I love it.
Let's go to Tom in Virginia listening on the EWTN app. Tom, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey, how's it going, Joe?
It's going well. How are you doing?
So I'm doing well. So my ex-wife recently divorced, is in a relationship with another woman, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain that relationship to my daughter via faith without causing a significant strain on the relationship with my ex-wife and I.
Wow, that's a complicated issue for a lot of reasons. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to preempt this by saying I don't think I can do justice to this question. But I can give you the basic principles. We're told in the New Testament to speak the truth in love. And I think those are the two poles that should be kept in close union. You don't want to say things that are going to cause an estrangement between your daughter and her mother. And this is especially true in the case of a recent ex, where there's probably a lot of raw emotions that maybe you haven't totally worked through yet, which is understandable. It's relatable. It's that's not your fault. But that's something to be, speak words of gentleness and truth and love, but don't water down the gospel. That marriage is a certain thing. And the relationship of men and women is a certain thing. And the sexual, orientation is such, everyone is oriented at the level of their body towards the opposite sex. Whether they live that out or not, there's an innate bodily orientation. Meaning, you've got a full respiratory system. You've got a full circulatory system. You've got half of a reproductive system. It's incomplete without the other sex. That all of us are made in this way, that's oriented towards the opposite sex, even if we don't feel psychologically that way. So I think all of those would be things to kind of bear in mind, but I would present that in as gentle of a way as possible. I didn't actually ask a really important question here, which is, how old is your daughter?
Currently, she's only 4 years old, but I think as time goes on, I don't see my ex-wife changing her current course. So,
yeah. Does she have a relationship with her still? Are they still in, or I don't know?
Everything is extremely amicable, completely 50-50 down the road. Okay. Everything's great.
Okay, good. That actually makes things better in a lot of ways.
Very good relationship with her daughter, yeah.
Good. Yeah, I know that Trent Horn and Layla Miller wrote a book called Made This Way, I believe.
Yep.
That is good about how to speak to kids about some of these difficult, kind of sensitive subjects. That might be a good book to send your way, just to give you some inspiration. Because I think it's important to bear in mind also, you can do the basics of theology of the body, just explaining how our bodies are made at 4. Because obviously you're not going to go in the same kind of detail as you would if she was 14 or 24.
Right.
All right, well, let's send them Made This Way. Hang on. If you want to give us the address, we'll send you Made This Way. And I got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum for New Catholics with Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because, if you look in the Catechism, you will see the fruits of Holy Communion. And these are remarkable things that we can receive at every Mass that we attend. We encounter the risen Lord, and He shares something of His divine life and love with us.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's street evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Joe Heschmeyer, author most recently of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, a wildly popular and well-received book. If you look at it on over there on Amazon, I think it's got, I'm not good with math, but more than 3 out of 5 stars. Well, definitely more than 2. How many? It's got 5 out of 5 stars. It's got 5 out of 5.
Oh, nice.
Oh, maybe 4.9, but you get all 5 filled in. If it's like...
I'm willing to round anything above 2.5 up to 5, Yeah. I think that's how that works.
Right. I think that's fair. Abby in Huntersville, North Carolina, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Abby, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi. So my question was, upon entering the church, when is it too early to start, when would it be too early to start maybe discerning a vocation? So I know for me, I'm actually getting married in October, but I feel really, really called to maybe join the lay Carmelites.
Oh.
And I'm not sure if it's
I'm
too early.
super relieved you said the lay Carmelites. So
We were both waiting for you to be a nun. We were like, oh, that poor guy.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be second to none.
He was a little freaked out by that question, too, actually. I didn't phrase it well the first time I mentioned it.
All right.
Hilarious.
So when did you come into the church, Abby?
Actually, I am fully entering this Saturday.
Oh, congratulations. Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's... go ahead, Joe.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it's a great question. And the fact that it's like the lay Carmelites actually makes it a little easier. So, I mean, to give the basic principles here, right? 1 Timothy 3, verse 6, St. Paul says, in laying on of hands for a bishop, that he must not be a recent convert, or he may be puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. And the idea there is you don't want to just go in when you're on the romantic high. And you don't want to go in when you're not well formed. And you don't want to, making a permanent decision like getting ordained when you're just a baby Catholic. That's a disaster. That's not the same for everything. That's not the same for marriage, right? It's not the same for being a lay member, like a third order member of a religious community, and for a lot of reasons. But there's still something of that principle that is worth kind of keeping in mind. So in one sense, when you ask, when is it too soon to start considering a religious vocation, I'd say the discernment process should begin immediately. But you probably shouldn't act on it right away. Do you see the distinction there? That you should take it to prayer, you should talk with God about it, and if it continues to grow, you should talk to someone with the Carmelites about it. And they, chances are, have their own standards for how recent of a convert, and for the same reasons I just outlined. They don't want you kind of rushing in just on the romantic impulse and then coming to regret it later. They want a kind of mature, serious discernment. And so I would start that mature and serious discernment now. I can't tell you when and how it'll end, because that's in God's hands alone. But it's something that you should be in conversation eventually. Basically, start praying about it now. If the desire continues to be there, in due course, when it feels appropriate, reach out to someone from the Carmelites and start having more of a dialogue about your desires and see what their discernment is in terms of lining up with that. And you'll see the clearest way forward, I think.
Okay, Abby?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. What an encouraging story it is. Saturday, you come in to the church, and I will. There's lots of people praying for you now, and we'll pray for you that it's a beautiful day.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Hope we hear from you again. We're going to go down to Louisiana now. Mike in Louisiana listening on WHNO EWTN radio. We're glad to have you, Mike. Go ahead, please, with your question for Joe.
Yes, my granddaughter has been diagnosed with a tumor, and we have a healing mass that she wants to go to on Friday during our Holy Rosary Novena. And I just like some advice on how to prepare her for this, what to expect, what for her to expect.
Oh, at the healing mass. Is it a regular healing mass? Is there a priest visiting who does healing?
It's a visiting priest.
A visiting priest. Okay. And
when you say what should she expect, are you saying in terms of results or in terms of what the experience will be like?
What the experience would be like. I've been to the masses, but I've never participated in them.
Are they very charismatic, these masses?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's usually the case with a healing mass.
Yeah. So it's hard to give a particular answer to what the healing mass will be like. I think if you've been to them before, you've got a sense of what they're like experientially. But in terms, I'm more prepared to say, like, swing for the fences, pray for physical healing if that's what you're desiring.
That's the intentions.
Yeah,
So
and so it may be that you don't get it.
I want to keep her pumped up so she doesn't back out at the last minute.
Yeah. I think, here's what I would say. Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane makes a prayer that if it be the Father's will, the cup will pass from his hands, and the cup does not pass from his hands. And he's showing us something, that even if you go in with the right intention, even if you go in with a pure heart, you may still not get the thing that you're wanting, but you should still ask for it, and you should still push for it. So often we have this kind of idea that if God's not going to give it to me for sure, I'm not going to ask. And that is a way of distrusting God. We should trust him enough to ask, even if we don't know if it's the right thing. We, to the best of our knowledge, I think this is the right thing, God. If you know better, do your will and not mine. That's a totally okay prayer. And to just say, like, here's what I think I need. Because this is how you relate to a father, right? Like, when a kid goes to their dad, they say, here's what I think I want, Dad. Maybe they don't say it that way. Maybe they just say, this is what I want, Dad. But a loving father knows, yeah, that's what you think you want, but actually, you have a bunch of soda right before bed. It's not going to be good for you. You're not going to be happy, or whatever it is, right? And so go with whatever you think is the right thing. And like I said, swing for the fences, and maybe a miracle will happen there. Or maybe you'll get some other answer to that prayer that you weren't even expecting. But you won't be given just a simple no with nothing else. He'll give you something. I just don't know for sure what.
Well, the way I see it right now, in a way I've already won, or God's already won, because she came to me wanting to go. I didn't offer it to her. She said, I want to go to this Mass.
Wow, beautiful. Yeah, I think, cultivate that and encourage it. But be prepared to kind of comfort her if she doesn't get what she wants, so she doesn't fall into discouragement.
Right. But she's mature enough to understand what's going on with that. I just want to make sure she don't get cold feet. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I want to just deal with a comment from Jeff, who called and said, "Why didn't you guys encourage Abby in her marriage vocation?" I didn't.
That wasn't what she was asking about.
I know.
Congratulations, Abby, on your upcoming nuptials. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And she can. It seems like she is very clear on the marriage. It seems like she was less clear whether to become a lay Carmelite or not.
I mean, we kind of did laugh because it sounded like she was heading towards, I'm getting married in October, but I think I'm going to become a nun. That's what it sounded like she was going to say for a second.
And those would be two incompatible states.
And that didn't seem like that was going to work, but that's not what happened. But I take Jeff's. I mean, marriage needs all the encouragement it can get, and so many young people are afraid of marriage, even terrified of marriage, or cynical about marriage. And marry, I think, get married, stay married, have lots of kids. That's what we're called to, and they're just discouraged in every way. I mean, when you say have lots of kids. There's people that wince at that because they don't see kids as kids. They see them as carbon footprints or something. And it's just horrible what's been done to young people. So
maybe I'd also add there are people who wince at that because maybe they're struggling with infertility and 1,000 other reasons.
Oh, yeah.
As Catholics, we should be a little sensitive to the whole, like, we want to proclaim the goodness of kids.
Yeah.
We want to be really encouraging that people should be open to life and really, not just open to it, but like, when you're getting married, you should want to have a family with the person you're marrying. And if you don't want to have a family with them, that's a big red flag.
Yeah. I take your point, Joe.
But that doesn't mean that, you know, like, we can sometimes, like, if you don't know someone else's situation, it's really easy to put your foot in your mouth. We're just like, oh, come on, why haven't you guys had kids yet? And maybe they've had like 7 miscarriages.
Right. But I do, I take your point, and I appreciate that. But I also want to be quite firm in opposing the lies and the propaganda about dumb things like overpopulation, which there's never been overpopulation ever anywhere in the history of the earth. That is not a thing, overpopulation. You want me to explain that to you? Call me and I'll explain it to you. There's been bad use of resources. There's been stupid wars. There's never been overpopulation. There's never been too many people, ever.
The theories behind overpopulation are based on the work of Malthus, who worked with Thomas Malthus, who looked at rats. And it turns out humans are not really that analogous to rats. And imagining they are is totally misanthropic. There's a great book. It's a little outdated now, called The Ultimate Resource 2. It actually just means like second edition, but it's like really significantly revised by an economist by the name of Julian Simon. And when they were making all these dire predictions about overpopulation in the 70s and 80s, he was just saying, yeah, let's make a bet on this. And he was right just across the board about all these dire predictions not coming true. And then his work was basically forgotten, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, the population bomb, the simple fact is the population bomb was phony. It was wrong. It was sold by Walter Cronkite and everybody else in the media, and it was wrong. It was a lie. Now, it wasn't a lie. I don't say Walter Cronkite was telling a lie, but it's
Paul Ehrlich, the guy who wrote it.
Actually, I think Paul Ehrlich believed it.
But
I mean, it was a satanic lie. It was a demonic lie. That it entertained humans with the idea that we could control such things. Stop it. Get married. Be joyful. Have children if the Lord blesses you with children. But the other thing I wanted to say, though, is I have noticed more women asking about vocations, and that's why I was kind of ready for Abby to ask about that. And I think that's a very healthy sign for the church.
Yes.
That young women and young men, but to myself, just in the last year or so, I've just anecdotally, more women asking about vocations to the religious life. And that is such an important and good and healthy sign for the life of the church and of the world.
Yeah, it really is. It's something so beautiful and so overlooked in terms of like the things that make the church beautiful. Religious sisters really get short shrift.
Yeah. You know what short shrift means?
Like they don't get the attention credit they deserve. I don't know the etymology of it.
Shrift is the sacrament of confession, being shriven of your sins. So short shrift is actually a reference to the priest is like, yeah, thanks, get up here, I absolve you, get out.
You're kidding me. That's amazing.
That's where short shrift comes from.
People were complaining about confessions not taking long enough. Imagine that next time you're in line.
I know. I don't mind if my confession takes a long time. I just don't want the people in front of me for their confession to take a long time.
I imagine they're better people than I am, so I'm like, get for the serious stuff.
Like you look like a lovely person. How can this be taking so long? But okay, that's judgmental on my part.
Yes, and that's why we spend a long time in the confession.
Right.
Did I give a little PSA? We missed a call from Joe in Kansas City who was not Catholic, but was asking a question about working through some doctrines as a barrier to evangelization. I don't know any of the other details about the call, but we dropped it. So I just wanted to give a personal invitation, if he still happens to be listening, to come to Our Lady of Good Counsel in Westport on any Monday night at 7. And there's a really good chance we're doing RCIA. And we do inquiry, which is for people who don't know if they want to be Catholic or not, to just come and talk about their issues about why they're not Catholic. So just to kind of give that as an invitation if he's there to hopefully hear it.
Say the name of the parish again.
Our Lady of Good Counsel.
All right, Joe, head over and look for Joe at Our Lady of Good Counsel. And as he said, he'll get you some free barbecue and talk about the Catholic Church with you. Did I add anything to that?
It's true, good and beautiful.
We need to have, as a matter of fact, we need to have some women religious on, Darren. and talk about this thing that's happening. We're more.
I just want to point out, this is the second scheduling aside you've made on air today.
I can't think
You're
of
like, hey,
things.
here's some shows we
When
could
you're
do this
on, I
fall.
can't think of things to talk about with you. So I just talked to Darren. I don't know what to make of you, Joe Heschmeyer. Joe Heschmeyer, you're a wonderful man, a beautiful apologist, an inspiration, and I'm so glad you did these hours with us. Thanks.
I'm tickled to end on that note. Thank you very much, Charlie.
And will you say hi to Anna, who I think is so far...
I'm not sure if she's still talking to you, but yeah, hopefully.
Okay, why? I didn't say anything about her. I just said your children are more interesting than your marriage, which I think is true. All right. She likes your children, doesn't she?
Oh, she does.
I think she likes
probably
your
agree with you, actually.
Yeah.
Although it's been a pretty interesting marriage, for better or for worse.
Well, yeah, the best thing is to have not a very interesting marriage. See you, Joe.
See ya.
Tomorrow, 2 hours of open forum. See you then, God willing. Catholic Answers Live.